Today, I am so excited to bring you Ruth Francis Long's The Treachery of Beautiful Things. It's been a minute since I've been really truly excited to bring you guys a book. And that, I think, says more about me than anything else. We know my track record in bringing to you books that I loved in my youth, yet no longer love in my adulthood. I've only read it once before, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago. I was afraid it was going to fall under the curse. Thankfully, it did not. This book was just stunning, beautiful. Loved the imagery and the language, the metaphors and symbolism. It ticked all of my boxes, which is why I realized that I enjoy fantasy, is because of writing like this. I think a majority of it lies in the fact that the author is not American. Like with Kate Morton, and I know Rowling is controversial, but for me, I don't really care what you guys say. I enjoy Harry Potter. I think it's done well. The way that the British, or in her case, the Irish, or in Morton's case, the Australian, there's something about their grasp of the English language that is a little bit more like lyrical. It's just not something that Americans can quite get their fingers on. The plot of this book is this young woman named Jenny. When she is about 10 years old, she and her brother Tom are walking back from music lessons. He's about 14 and he's a music prodigy. It is dusk. Something kind of comes alive in the forest. Tom ends up getting sucked in to this forest. For the next 7 years, they never see nor hear from him again. Jenny is labeled as crazy. She's an outcast everywhere she goes. But because of this, she has learned to be strong. She has learned not to listen to others because she knows what she witnessed was real. Now we are 7 years into the future. She has just graduated from high school and she is on her way to college. She has gotten her parents to agree to let her go to Scotland for college or for university. But before she does that, she's going to try to find her brother one last time. She goes to the edge of this wood. This wood comes alive and she's able to cross over into another realm. Now she's there. She doesn't necessarily know she's there until she realizes like the breadth and the width of this thing does not jive with how large the wood is supposed to be. So she's just walking along and she's meeting the fae, the fairy creatures that live in this wood. She meets these like little sprite creatures. Right after the fairy shot her, she's passing out only for this young man to appear. And he introduces himself as Jack of the Forest. He is the protector of the Edge, and the Edge is the border between herself and this world, which reminds me, she got sucked into the world because she heard Tom playing, because he's a flutist, and she heard him playing, she knew it was him, which is when she stepped over and was able to enter this world. Now she's like passed out. It's essentially her quest to find her brother, to rescue her brother, and then overcome all the obstacles that she encounters on the way. We jump into Tom. So these are our two narrative perspectives, Jenny and Tom. Tom is like, this girl, we've got to get her out of here. Over the course of the novel, we learn that she is something special. We keep hearing about her heart and her spirit, but particularly her heart and how she has this pure heart, and there's something about humans that the fae can't get enough of. And that is something that I wished had been explained a little better. What makes her so different? Because then we learn that she's the May Queen, and we all know about the May Queen and all that. Not that I was actually confused, but I felt like there were just some little threads that were left untied, that they're just kind of dangling. A lot happened in this novel, but not in a bad way. It was probably a case of the author knowing things and so not necessarily realizing that there's something she could explain a little further. And then obviously her editor, her readers, they must not have taken issue with it the way that I did. Not that it was an issue, but in this book, what she does is she essentially takes all those myths and folklores that we all consider to be myth and folklore, and she reveals them to be true. So the whole idea of the May Queen, and the May Queen is supposed to be a sacrifice, everything was true, but with her own little twist. I would have liked for her to explain kind of what her twist on the whole May Queen thing was, except that the May Queen was brought in every so often. The forest would recognize this May Queen, and then essentially the May Queen would battle against the forces of evil, win, lose, whatever. We do learn that Jenny is the newest May Queen to have broached or breached their boundaries, but that she's an exceptionally special May Queen, which again was something that wasn't quite explored enough for me personally. We are with Jack. Jack is talking to a little hobgoblin named Puck. I quite enjoyed Puck. One of the things about this novel is that you never knew who to trust. You never knew who was truly good and who was truly bad, well, with few exceptions. And Jack and Puck were two of them, where, I mean, straight up, we're told they're not to be trusted, and they're not to be trusted, but it's not necessarily because they're bad, but it's because of their nature, and that both of them serve the king, who's Oberon. They are bound to him, whether they like it or not. They serve him, and they do his will. They're his slaves, and so, you know, even though Puck might betray them sometimes, like it's not necessarily because he wanted to do it, but it's because he had to do it, but then like he was gonna do it either way. So I thought they were really complicated, and I quite enjoyed them. Jack and Puck are talking, and Jack is like, I know she's on a quest. I know my duty is to guard the edge and take care of those who cross the edge. So I know she's on a quest, and I'm bound to that duty as well, but like, we need to get her out of here. And of course, Puck is like, she's looking for her brother. She's looking for the Piper. So then they decide, hey, since she's been shot by these like little fairy creatures, she's gonna be easily suggestible. So we are just, when she wakes up, we are going to suggest that there's nothing wrong. This way we will get her where she needs to go. She wakes up and she can sort of tell the lies from the reality, but not enough so that she doesn't let them lead her on. They encounter Queen Titania. There is something sinister about her. She may be beautiful, but there is something not quite right about her. And what she and her people are doing is they are chasing the Piper. My first impression was that they knew that Jenny had arrived, but I guess they didn't. But the Piper had run away, and they were going to come and bring him back. At this point, Jenny, like, the magic wears off, and she's like, dude, Puck is not a dog. He's a fawn. He's like half man, half goat. He's very much in my head, either the guy from Chronicles of Narnia or the dude from Hercules. She's like, Jack, you lied to me. He then is like, all right, well, you have this quest, but it's almost nightfall. You cannot be out here at night, so I'm going to deliver you to some of my friends, the woodsman and his wife. He takes her there. If I have an issue with this novel, it is that in some ways it was pointless. Like, they literally would walk in circles because what she wants and what Jack wants are opposing. We don't really establish what they're walking towards. Maybe she's under the impression that Jack is taking her to her brother, but he has never said, yes, I will take you to your brother. As he delivers her to the woodsman, then he goes off for the night. She is warned, do not eat anything made by fairy hands. If it's grown from the ground or whatnot, like, it is fine, but do not eat anything that is fairy made. She goes to bed, and then she wakes up, because when she first lost Tom, there was this thing in the woods. And so she's like, there's something in the woods right now. She's looking out the window, and then she starts to hear the woodsman and his wife talking about sacrificing her to some creature or creatures. You get the impression that they had sacrificed their own daughter some years prior, and that maybe the wife was also somehow being sacrificed in certain ways, and the woodsman was like, look, She's a much better sacrifice. I don't want to lose you, and there is something about her that these creatures will like more. She's trying to get out of the window. I think she's still under the spell of being Fae shot. She gets out, she falls on the ground, and she's unable to go anywhere. Then these creatures come out of the night, and back to my Harry Potter fans, is red caps, like red caps and hinky punks. We still don't really know what red caps are in this world, so I guess it's a matter of looking up what a red cap is. All we know is that they are not good, and that they feed off humans, sucking her blood. And the woodsman and his wife are more concerned about the fact that they're getting her all at once versus being fed to them little by little. Anyways, she passes out. They come, they take her back inside, and they tie her to the bed. The wife starts feeding her to the little baby red cap. She'll place them on her skin, and they'll like suck her dry. Or I guess in the end, that is what is going to happen, is they will suck her dry. We don't know what that time period is, but in the meantime, she's stuck at this house and she's never gonna get out. Then Jack reappears. The couple are successful in being like, oh yeah, no problem. We took her to the edge, fine. And at this point, we all know Jack is not fooled because his interactions with Jenny definitely saying that she was not gonna go easily. Like, she had a mission and that was that. So from the moment that they say, oh, she was no problem, docile as a lamb, like he knows they're lying. Night falls again, and this huge storm blows up. A tree falls on this house and essentially kills the woodsman and his wife. Puck comes and he rescues Jenny, but not before she looks back and she sees this creature. Woodsman wasn't quite dead. She sees this creature kill him in an extremely gruesome way. She's still very confused as to where Jack is, but she's just kind of scarred by what she's seen, and Puck is like, everything's fine. That creature will not come after you. And what I also loved was how Long tied everything back to nature, and how all these questions that she had about motivations for certain things or the reasonings behind certain things, it all came back to, well, that's what nature is intended for. That is what this particular piece of nature is intended for. So it's all just being taken back. And his explanation for this huntsman and the wife being killed is that they had made a pact with the forest to take care of the forest. But by then changing their allegiance to these red caps, turning their back on the forest and taking care of the forest turns it back on them, and therefore they are killed by the nature of the forest and what comes from the forest. She wakes up the next day and Jack is there. They just have a really tumultuous relationship because they're at loggerheads. She wants one thing, he wants the opposite for her. And he lost her trust the moment that he tried to convince her that he and Puck were something else. She just doesn't really trust him, and she doesn't understand why he keeps leaving her. She also lost trust for him when he left her with the woodsman and his wife, and essentially like didn't come back for her and made her believe that he was going to accept their explanation and that this was going to be the rest of her life. They kind of just have it out a lot of the time. There comes a point where Puck is asleep, Jack is gone, and she's like, I gotta go find my brother. So she strikes it out on her own, only to hear the forest, which, I mean, this forest is a character of its own, and I loved it. This forest that had gone unnaturally silent just like roars to life. What she finds is this creature that she takes to be a baby tied to a tree or something, and then this horrible creature dead on the ground. She knows that the dead creature died fighting and lost. So she takes the baby and she's like, I gotta get this kid out of here. It turns out to be, I think it's called Alexi. We sort of learn what it is, but essentially it's like, it's just a creature of the forest. She takes this baby being like, I'm not gonna let it be sacrificed. She goes to sleep, Jack comes back, and he's like, oh, what is that? We need to put that back. She takes him to where she found the creature, and he's like, that thing over there is his dad. We need to put it back and get out of here. They see this weeping woman. Jenny's like, that's its mother. She's like, I'm gonna go give this kid back, and Jack is like, do not do it. She lets out this cry, and a dragon appears. I guess we're led to believe that she summoned the dragon almost as like a death call because she's in so much mourning over the loss of her child and her partner. But then Oberon appears and is like, oh, that was a test for Jenny. I sent this dragon, and I guess the dragon is supposed to be Titania's of some sort. It doesn't matter. They manage to defeat the dragon. Jenny gives the baby back and is rewarded with this stone from the Lexi. And she's like, this is to repay the debt. Make a wish on it and bury it. Your wish will come true. So then they part ways, and Jack is just like, this girl's an idiot. But it all comes back to her heart and how her heart is what makes her special, and her heart is what is going to make her the great May Queen. And there's something just strong about her. That characteristic is emphasized over and over. And I found myself getting tired of it because we only see that strength while we're in Jack's perspective. Whenever we're with Jenny, it's almost like she has no clue what she's doing. She's just going blindly and doing things that everybody else thinks are really dumb decisions, but in essence are what proves her to be so valuable. I mean, I don't want to make this book sound bad. I just simply found myself confused and frustrated because I wasn't seeing through her actions, like, why she's being so brave. It's not until we get to Jack that he keeps saying, oh, she's brave, she's brave, she's brave. And I'm like, but she's not brave. Like, when I'm with her, she's not brave. She's not being brave. So, like, what do you mean? And that's when this whole enigmatic thing just kind of, it made things a little heavier. He then gets called away by Titania, and Titania says, hey, I need you to bring her to me. Whereas Oberon, who is his true master, is like, you need to bring her to me. This was a little confusing for me as well because his allegiance wasn't to Titania. It is to Oberon, but his allegiance sort of is towards Titania, but because he will always do what Oberon wants, which I do understand it in essence because it's explained at the end why he is Oberon's, but I was just like, but he's not really either. He kind of has his own free will, but then he doesn't. But because he constantly rejects Titania, she hates him. But we are led to believe that she has his heart, but then it's like, oh no, Oberon has his heart. So what was in that box she pulled out? But we are also learning that Titania is inhabited by this old ancient queen named Mab. The May Queen comes in and battles Mab, and then she either wins or loses, usually loses. Mab eats her heart, and this is what allows Mab to continue on. Titania, though, had beat Mab, and then she had eaten Mab's heart. But in the end, Mab still came back stronger than ever, and she overtook Titania. So Titania no longer exists. Like, Mab just inhabits her body. It's kind of like sometimes Titania does exist until Mab shows up. And I don't know. And like Titania she and Oberon hate each other, but then they love each other. And it was hard to wrap my mind around. I do wish I'd gotten more about Mab because I didn't understand who Mab was. Like, I got the essentials, like Mab, perhaps like the original queen. She is extremely evil, and in order to continue to live, she eats the heart of the May Queen, and that is kind of what the May Queen is about, is the sacrifice. But how could Titania have beat Mab only for Mab to have come back and beat Titania? I I need explanation. Now Jack is between a rock and a hard place because he knows what he has to do. Titania has promised him certain freedoms and perhaps even his heart, but he knows he has to bring Jenny to Oberon. So he's like, I have no clue what I'm going to do. But the only caveat for both of these people is that Jenny has to come willingly. Just like if she does consume Fae food, she has to do it of her own volition in order for it to have the proper effect. He comes back only for it to be like evening time, so he's like, actually I gotta go. Then he somehow encounters their camp, attacks Puck. Jenny then like grabs a stick and like wards him off, and he kind of pauses and he leaves. We don't know that he is that green man. We don't know that he is this creature that Jenny had seen in the woods when Tom had disappeared. We don't know that he is the creature that essentially finished off the woodsman. But what we do know is that yes, now after some bit that he is like of two minds. Like he has his day self and he has his night self, and eventually what we'll learn is his night self is actually his true self, because when Jenny is rescued from the woodsman, Puck explains to her that the creature she saw was a kobold, and then he gives her this long explanation. She's like, what is that? He tells her how kobolds were the sprites or like kind of the spirits of the trees, and then at night they would come out from their trees and do this, that, the other. But then their trees would be cut down, carved into a figure, what would lock the spirit of this kobold inside of it, and then they would put it in a box to basically keep it from coming out and wreaking havoc. And then to teach the children not to mess with these boxes, they essentially created a Jack in the Box. Spoiler, that's what Jack is. He's a kobold, and his true self is what comes out at night. And he just turns into this like woodsy, branchy, whatever kind of creature, and he's not good, but he's not bad. He just is what he is, and he wreaks havoc depending on what the needs are. Long story short, Jenny chases Jack through the forest, almost catches him, but instead she like rams into him because she can't stop her momentum. When she comes to, Jack is himself again. He just says some things that are meant to turn her off, meant to turn her away, to despise him in a sense. So she runs off. She encounters this attractive young man playing the harp by the river, and she's drawn to him. And when they kiss, it is revealed that he is what is called a Nyx, which again, I didn't do my homework on that, but he is in some form or fashion a servant of Titania, and he is her favorite harpist. So this kiss, it can do two things. It can either just flat out kill her, or it can separate her body from her soul, which is what happens in this case. And now we're kind of getting a very Sleeping Beauty-esque situation, because Jack comes upon her too late. He sees the Nyx jump into the water with her because he's a water creature. So what he says is he's like, I've got to go rescue her. And Puck is like, you cannot rescue her. One, you're a creature of the wood and the sun. Like you cannot subsist down in the depths of the water. Two, there's just no way you can kill him. What they ultimately come to is that he can kill him, but he has to get his weapon from the human world. And in order to do that, he has to get it from Oberon's arch enemy. Oberon essentially gets him to promise that he will no longer seek his freedom. Like he has no way of ever escaping and getting what he wants. He will be a servant to Oberon until his dying day. So he forfeits his freedoms. He passes into the real world with Oberon's protection, because these Fae folk cannot pass the boundaries. They cannot go over the edge without certain death. He happens upon Wayland, who is the arch enemy, which again, I needed so much more of this. Like I need a prequel and then I need a sequel, because there's also stuff about Jack that I'm like, I need more about that. He has this conversation with Wayland. Wayland's like, you're an idiot. What you're doing is certain death. Like you are sacrificing yourself for a human, for a female, for a woman, you are a fool. But we learn that Oberon never makes a bet that he can't lose. And the money that Jack uses to obtain access to Wayland, as well as to pay for the sword that he gets, is basically with Wayland's own money. Somehow he had made, and this maybe would make sense if I had read up on this mythology. Again, though, these are the things that need to be put into the book so that we don't have to do all that extra work. Oberon gives Jack stuff that he had stolen from Wayland, and Wayland is like verklempt over the return of these items. He's like, so here's a sword. This was my own sword before I fought Oberon, and he maimed me and he tossed me out on my tushy. But what I'm also going to give you, because you overpaid for this sword, I'm going to give you this little thing made of iron. And iron is deadly to the Fae. It turns out to be a jack, which I loved how Long kept tying in what a jack could be. There's just so many connotations that go along with the name Jack. And then she ties them all in so that they're all different facets of the Jack character. And so Jack is like, okay. I mean, obviously he can't touch it, but then Wayland is like, because he has no idea what it is. And Wayland's like, it'll also make her smile, which it does. He takes this sword, he goes back home, and he dives into the water, but not before Puck and all the forest folk have essentially created this casket for her, very Snow White-like, and they're all gonna watch over it, and they're all rooting for Jack, and so he goes into the water. We see things from Jenny's perspective where the Nyx has two sisters, and what he wants, because what they value most in fairy is real metal, gold, silver, whatever like that. And so he is like, Titania knows I have her spirit, and she's not gonna get it until she gives me my gold. Apparently, her spirit being separated from her body makes her more accessible and weakens her, whereas when she's together, she's a lot more difficult to overcome. I guess by touching her, like running his hand through her, he can absorb her essence, her life energy. I don't really know. It makes them stronger, and eventually it will kill Jenny. Jack comes in, and those sisters are like, oh my gosh, he's coming. And we just keep getting these instances of Jack is something else. Like, he is more important than we know. He is possibly more important than even he knows. And the Nyx is like, dude, just like, you know, lull him with your song and kill him and be done with it. Like, he can't survive down here. He kills the sisters. This infuriates the Nyx. Jack has been away from his elements too long, so he's losing steam. Jenny inhabits his body. They're able to overcome the Nyx. They get to the surface. Again, we're getting Snow White here, and he's like, how do I get her back into her own body? He kisses her. She goes back, and then this is the moment where she sees that he is that green man because he transforms before her eyes. They have this whole big discussion, blah, 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 and Jack is still torn. Like, what am I gonna do? But he agrees to take her to Titania because all she wants is her brother. And he's like, dude, your brother is not who you remember. It's been 7 years. Things are different when he has been in Titania's court for 7 years. They get to her castle, run into Tom, who, yeah, he's pretty callous. Like, he's not willing to go with her. He's like, I'm staying here. We learn that he is going to be a tithe, which I know what tithe means. And I understand that I guess every 7 years or something, they have to have a blood sacrifice. And this is why Jenny got pulled in, was because he was going along the edge trying to lure a human in with his music, and that they could then be the sacrifice instead of him. It needed a bit more explaining too, but he never meant it to be Jenny. It just so happened, and then Jenny just so happened to be the May Queen. Like, the forest determines who this May Queen is, and they've accepted her as their queen, blah, 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 blah. Titania then forces her to drink this substance, which is what also keeps Tom in his new fairy state. But obviously, because she was forced, it didn't have the intended effect. It still puts her in this state of dream, whereas like in reality, she's cleaning the floors of the palace, and that's what all these humans are doing. Is they've all just been under a spell for however long. They're walking dummies. In her vision, she is dancing with this handsome king. She is their queen. Like, she's trying to get away from him, but she can't. He brings her to this throne. This throne accepts her as its own. He crowns her. It turns out that he's Oberon. And then Jack, who in the fight against Titania, Jenny is like, I'll just do it. Like, don't kill him. I will come willingly. But he is still like sucked into the ground, and we don't really know what happened to him. He could have died. He could have just been sent back to Oberon. But he appears in this vision. He has this heart necklace that she gave him. She does hear Titania in real time, and she's like, I'm getting out of this vision. So she's able to break her way out of it, essentially because she found the iron jack in her pocket, and it was able to like cut into her skin and break the trance and blah, blah, blah. Tom comes and finds her. He's like, I've got to get you out of here. She's like, but you're coming with me. And he is no longer under the influence of this drink either. And he's just like, I can't. This is my place. And she's like, no, you are wanted at home. And he's arguing, like, to her, he was the golden child. To him, he was a pawn. Like, their parents didn't care about him. They didn't care about the music he made the way that Jenny did. They just cared about what he could be, like kind of what he could get them. He doesn't want to go home. He doesn't want to be that person. They successfully escape. Like, he says, I'm going to take you to the edge. I'm going to get you out of here. And she's like, well, I'm going to get you out of here too. Titania is following them only for Puck to reappear. He is able to get them there safely because he had promised Jack that he would get Tom home safely, like on his life. And there's all this stuff about vows. This is the point where she is the May Queen and the forest is bowing to her and helping her escape, which it leads to a question later on for me. But Tom successfully crosses the edge, but she is like, I've got to find Jack. And Tom's like, you don't even know this guy. Like, he lied to you, he betrayed you. And she's like, but I love him. If we didn't see that coming. I love him. She's like, all right, Puck, you need to take me to Oberon because Jack is at Oberon's dominion. And Puck is like, you're never going to come back out. Like, you cannot make a wager with Oberon and win. She's like, but watch me. So she goes in there of her own free will. Oberon is like, okay, so sure. Because she's like, all I want from you is for you to let me and Jack go. And he's like, okay, all right, well, if you can find him. Going back to the whole kobold thing, Jack is a kobold. Like, he was the king of the oak. And this is when I'm like, I need a prequel to this novel to explain, because we all know me, even though I'd read it once, it'd been a minute. So I read ahead to the end because I was just like, I want to know what happens. Like, I want to refresh my memory on kind of how it ends. And they're just talking about how Jack is the king. He is the oak king. And so this whole time I'm like, what is he? Like, what is so significant about the oak king? Because we're also led to believe that he and Oberon kind of battled it out and Oberon won. So I'm like, was Oberon not here originally? But then it seems like Oberon and Mab were there originally. So there's a lot that I still needed explained. I needed it to be clearer. Yes, he was the Oak King. He and all of his fellow kobolds, they had been defeated by Oberon. He had cut down their trees and he had carved them all into the same likeness, therefore emasculating Jack, our Jack, and making him one amongst many rather than their leader, than their king. However, he kind of had freedoms and abilities the others didn't because he was their leader. So there were special things about Jack, things that made him unique. So she gets there. Oberon is like, okay, sure, you gotta find Jack. And then a hundreds, if not thousands, if not more, of Jack lookalikes appear. And she's like, what in the heck? Now it goes back to this idea of listen to your heart. It's all about the heart. She is able to locate Jack inside a box. So now he is Jack in the box. And they're tied together by that heart necklace. I think it's like a locket that she gave him. And of course, Oberon's like, whoever said I was going to keep my word? And Jack is like, well, you have to. You are bound by your word. So Oberon's like, sure, fine, go. I release you, but now you are at the mercy of Queen Titania. They're back in the forest, and they're like, we gotta get the heck out of Dodge, only for Titania's hounds to be heard. And now they're racing against time. They're racing against Titania and her folks. And this is when I'm like, if the forest had protected her before by providing a path for her to escape, to get Tom out, and then closing up behind her so that Titania and her people could not get them, why isn't it doing the same thing this time? Obviously, if it had done that, it would have been too easy and we would not have had the ending we had. Now they are cornered by Titania. Jack is transforming into his green man self, and she's like, I'm not letting go of you. This, when I read ahead, it was, I mean, to be fair, like I was reading in bed when it was time to go to bed, so my brain was not always sharp and I was literally falling asleep. Not because I didn't love the book. This book was one that I was like, can I please just get back to it? But for some reason, because I hadn't read the stuff about him being the Green Man yet, I thought Titania was turning him into this. No, he was just by his own nature turning into this. And Jenny was like, I'm not letting go. So, you know, like he's piercing her flesh with his thorns and all the stuff on his green man self. But she's like, I'm not letting go. And something about this helped break his spell. He is no longer Oberon's servant. He is no longer this divided creature. Like the forest is rejoicing. And this is what I don't get. She's the May Queen, and now she has chosen her king. She did not choose Oberon. She chose Jack, because they're all like, who is the king of the forest? The oak. Who is the king of the forest? The oak. Titania is unable to get anybody to obey her because Jenny has essentially defeated her and she has chosen her own king. We don't get enough time in the aftermath to really dive into what that means or what that means for this community, because then Titania tricks them all into thinking, okay, well, I've given up, at least for a moment, only to like turn back around, and she separates Jenny from everybody else, assumes her Mab form. They have at it. Jenny like takes this Jack and she stuffs it into Titania / Mab's mouth. Mab / Titania dies. I guess this effectively finishes off Mab, but then because Titania wasn't actually a living, breathing creature anymore, because Mab had just taken her over and had assumed her appearance, she is dead too. And then Oberon appears and he's like, how dare you kill my queen? I let you go, blah, 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 blah. Jack grabs Jenny and then they bolt over the edge, at which point he dies. I don't understand. It seems like you officially saved your kingdom in whatever capacity you were and or are and or could have been the king. Like, I don't know where Oberon would have been in this. Jenny is on the other side. Jack has died. He has been consumed by the earth. Puck is like from the other side. Remember the gift from the Lexi. She had earlier in the novel tried to wish Jack to her and had buried it. Puck had dug it up and now he hands it to her. She makes a new wish, being like, please bring him back to me. She buries it in the earth. Nothing happens. We fast forward 6 months and she's at university and she is in her like folklore class. And wouldn't you know, there's this guy there who looks just like Jack. And she's like, no way. And his name is Mr. Woodhouse. And she's like, that is Jack. But he doesn't seem to recognize her at all. They leave class and she's resigned herself to the fact that this probably isn't Jack. And even if it is, there's nothing that's going to come of it. When she walks by and he's sitting under an oak tree, and I love the symbolism. Long does such a great job at continuing to tie things together and continuing to bring it back around. He's like, hey you, I know I don't know you, but I feel like I do know you, and I feel like this is yours. He shows her the Lexi stone, and she's like, this is 100% Jack. He's just like, kind of hoping that she's seen a flicker of recognition. The thing about this Lexi stone is that while it may work faster in Feyland, it is stronger in the human realm. So it took 6 months for Jack to come back, but she makes another wish on this stone, and Jack is like, holy cow, how could I have ever forgotten you? And we have a happily ever after. I look forward to seeing more of you next week. Bye.